Naaman was a commander in the Syrian army, favored by his king for all the battles he had won. But he did have this one problem. He had leprosy and had not been able to find a cure for it. His king felt as sorry for him as anyone did. But there was in Naaman's house an Israeli servant girl who knew about the prophet Elisha and his miracle-working reputation. One day she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his illness." It was a long shot, but Naaman must have decided it was worth a try. He went to his king and told him about this prophet in Israel. The king sent him to Samaria, where he presented himself to the king of Israel and delivered this message from his own king: "Cure this man." But when the king of Israel heard that, he tore his clothes. What could he do? He was a mere mortal. "Is the king trying to start a fight with me that he asked me to do something impossible?" he said. When Elisha heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to him and said, "Send the man to me." And so Naaman came to the home of Elisha the prophet, followed by a wagon bearing 10 talents of silver, 10,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of new clothes. Even in those days, medical expenses were nothing to sneeze at. But when he pulled up in front of the prophet's house, Elisha didn't even come out. He sent a messenger to Naaman telling him that all he had to do was dip himself in the river Jordan 7 times. God would take care of the rest. Do you see how Elisha has changed? He trusts the power of God so completely that he himself doesn't even have to be present. Reminds me of that story in the Gospels where Jesus is on his way to heal the servant of a Roman centurion. The centurion sends a message and says, "You don't have to come. I know how power works. I say to this one, 'Come,' and he comes, and to this one, 'Go,' he goes. You don't have to come to my house. Just give the word, and my servant will be healed." And Jesus said, "Not even in Israel have I seen faith like this." Naaman was commander of the Syrian army. He understood better than most how power works. But he was a little too impressed with his own power. He said, "I thought surely for me the prophet would come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He was in a huff, is what he was. But once again, it is the servants in the story who come to the rescue. They say to him, "Master, if the prophet had asked you to do a hard thing, you would have done it, wouldn't you? How much more when all he told you to do was wash?" And even in his state of mind, Naaman can see the good sense in what they say. And so he goes down to the Jordan River. He strips off his clothes. He takes the bandages off his sores. He wades out into the water. And it feels so good, so cool as it swirls around his body. The mud squishes up between his toes. He holds his nose and dips himself down under the surface of the water 7 times, counting carefully. And when he comes up the 7th time, his flesh is restored like the flesh of a young boy. He is clean. He comes up out of the water and returns to the house of the prophet. He stands before Elisha and says, "Now I know that there is no God in all the earth but the God of Israel." This is an old story about the healing of a Syrian leper. It's hard to imagine how it might apply to our own modern American lives. But I think there are lessons here about what may be required for our own healing. Lessons about the source of all power and the proper reception of the gift. Elisha had learned through his own experience that the magic wasn't in the mantle. The power wasn't in the prophet, but only in God. It could not be coerced through elaborate rituals or special potions or secret charms. If you read these narratives carefully, you see that Elisha begins to give up on all that hocus pocus, trusting the power of God more and more. I would like to believe we could do the same. Naaman thought that Elisha would come out and say some magic words and wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Sometimes we approach our prayers like that. We think we have to have just the right words or just the right prayer, that we have to have the right person praying for us or enough people praying to do the job. And like Naaman, we have already figured out what the right answer will be. But that's not how prayer works. We don't need elaborate prayers. We don't need to know any magic words. We only need direct our plain and simple prayers to the one who has the power. And sometimes the more simple they are, the better it is. Lord, I need help is a good prayer.